Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the market revolution and social reform. For this topic, your questions are, why did so many immigrants come to the United States during the time of the market revolution? Which immigrants came to the US during this period? And what was the reaction to the arrival of these immigrants? First of all, when we talk about immigration, we need to speak generally about what causes immigration and why people end up coming to a particular country. So, first of all, a push factor is something that pushes people out of their home country. It can be war, famine, poverty, persecution, or discrimination, but just something that pushes people out. A pull factor is something that pulls people into a particular country. For example, what draws immigrants to the United States rather than to Canada or Brazil or some other country? Why are they coming here? So taking a look at the chart, you'll notice that during this time of the market revolution, we see this dramatic increase in the number of immigrants coming to America. So to answer our first question, why do so many immigrants come during the market revolution? And it's because of the pull factor of industrialization. America has all of these jobs available, so people want to come to the United States during this time. One of the largest groups, in fact, we have three noticeably large groups of immigrants coming in during this time. Those from Britain, we've already talked much about them, the Irish, and the Germans. So we're going to focus here on first the Irish and then the German immigrants coming to the United States during the period of the market revolution. So first of all, the Irish have a very serious push factor, and that is the potato famine. There was a plant disease that destroyed the potato harvest, which meant that people were starving. I mean, it's a famine, and it's going to cause the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Irish, and it's going to lead to the leaving of so many Irish during this period. When we take a look at this group in particular, we notice that most of the immigrants coming to the United States are young single individuals. So yes, there are some families coming over, but for the most part, it's going to be young single men and women who are traveling alone. When they get here, many people had sort of bought into this idea of they are going to be prosperous once they reach the United States, that they're going to be able to own a farm of their own, but that wasn't the reality. Most of the Irish immigrants were so poor that they couldn't leave the port cities where they arrived. So whether their ship stopped in New York or Boston or Philadelphia, that's where these people ended up. They had no other choice but to stay. They couldn't afford to move west, to find that land, to own their own farm. When the Irish arrive, they are going to face some serious hostility, partly because they're Catholic, but partly because they're Irish. It's kind of difficult for us to understand this anti-Catholic sentiment that was happening at this time. But for a lot of Americans who were Protestant, they felt like Catholics would violate the freedom of religion that the United States was founded on, this idea of separating church and state. For some people, they argued that the Catholics were never going to be loyal to a secular government because they owed their loyalty to the Pope in Rome. Okay, so it's this myth of Catholic allegiance that leads to hostility. But the other issue has to do with the Irish themselves. Keep in mind that Ireland is not an independent nation at this time. It's part of the British Empire. And the British have not treated the Irish very well. In fact, you could almost describe it as a colonization of Ireland, much like you could talk about the colonization of India or other places. So the British treated the Irish as second-class citizens. And this is going to follow the Irish in their travels to America. It's also built on some quack science, some shady science or pseudoscience that says that the shape of a person's skull is an indication of their intelligence. So when you take a look at the illustration in the lower left-hand corner, the man on the far left is Irish, the man on the far right is of African descent, and then the man in the middle is of, it says Anglo-Teutonic, which means British German descent. So that was the standard. That guy in the middle was the standard against which all other people would be measured. And for the Irish, they were viewed as less than intelligent. And so people often talked about the Irish race as if it was actually separate from other Caucasian people. And so the sign at the lower right was quite commonly seen during the period of the Market Revolution. This is not a joke. These are signs that actually showed up that no Irish need apply. Now, what's interesting is because of their isolation, because of their discrimination, the Irish tended to settle in tight-knit communities within the large cities. And what ends up happening is that some Irishmen begin to build political powers in their neighborhoods or in their political precincts. And then they're able to pull up the rest of the community through that political power. So by the time we get into the 1850s or even the 1860s, we see that the Irish have a very staunch foundation of political power within these major cities. In a stark contrast to the Irish, Germans are coming for a much different reason. Many Germans are leaving in the aftermath of the failed 1848 revolution. When you are on the losing side of a revolution, you might find it in your best interest to leave the country. And that's exactly what these people did. And so because of their reasoning for leaving, many people traveled in groups, sometimes even entire community groups. And because many of those who supported the revolution were doctors, lawyers, teachers, other educated people, many of them had some money with them when they arrived. So they're able to move beyond the port cities and settle in the rural areas where they could buy their own farms. Unlike the Catholic Irish, the Germans had a greater variety of religious viewpoints. Some were Lutherans, some were Catholic, some were Jews, and there was a smattering of other religious groups. So that made it less likely that the Germans would be persecuted for their faith. Much like other immigrant groups, the Germans are going to form enclaves. These are these little sub-communities within the larger community group where you have that familiarity with culture and language and food and tradition. So when you take a look at this map, the darker colors represent the higher concentrations of German immigrants in that area. Not everybody is happy that the Germans are here. Not everyone is happy that the Irish are here. In fact, as immigration booms during the Market Revolution, the backlash is really strong. There's a very vigorous anti-immigrant sentiment in the United States. And we see this in various groups, like the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner. This was a private organization that wanted to limit the influence and the number of immigrants coming into the US. In fact, by the time we get into the 1840s, we're going to see them sort of coalesce around a political agenda. And so the American Party is a political party that was created by those who oppose immigration. Their nickname is the Know Nothings. And this goes back to the idea that this was a secret society, that the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner was a secret society. And if you were asked about it, you were supposed to reply, "I know nothing." So if we think about why so many immigrants come to the United States during the time of the market revolution, the simple answer is this is where the jobs are. So people are coming to the jobs. It's a pull factor. Which immigrants came to the US during this period? We see lots of British, but also lots of Irish and lots of Germans. And then finally, what was the reaction to the arrival of these immigrants? And the answer was a resurgence of nativism, this anti-immigrant hostility. And so groups like the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner represent this hostility toward immigrants. Okay, so stay tuned for our third and final part of the market revolution and social reform.